in Boca Raton, Florida, and it is such an incredible event, and I'm so excited to be here. The STARR Coalition brings such a critical voice to this event with pharma advocates and different mental health research and clinical trials, and brings advocates, and it's such an incredible experience to have all of us together and getting to interact and talk about what we're all bringing to the mental health field.
I've been involved with the STARR Coalition since its inception. I think it's an amazing organization, and what we have in common is, among other things, is that we believe that recovery is possible, that people can achieve their goals, and that treatment works.
And I'm actually working on one of the projects that's getting ready to roll out, STARR 911. I'm one of the co-authors on the poster over there, but we're hoping to help with suicide prevention and bridging the gap in research.
So I've been with the STARR Coalition since it began about 4 years ago, and it's been an incredible experience every year to see a bunch of people from different backgrounds all looking for different experiences in patient care coming together and collaborating.
There is a light, a certain kind of light, never shine on me. Wanted my whole life to be lived with you, lived with you.
So, for some of you guys, I want to introduce you. We're the STARR Coalition. Some of you guys are new to the STARR Coalition. We've got new stakeholders out there. It stands for Stakeholders in Treatment, Advocacy, Research, and Recovery. And what we do is we work to bring together those in pharma, clinical research, CROs, and we bring our friends of advocacy into the discussion. Because we know the importance of the work that we're doing in clinical research to find new therapies and new cures for individuals who are struggling with the symptoms of CNS disorders, and each one of us have an important part to play in that. So what we do is bring all you fine minds together as a nonprofit on a level playing field, that we can come up with really innovative, creative programs in order to, number one, reduce the stigma and the discrimination that we have for no logical reason, and to also find a way to let people know that clinical research is an option, that we can all be a part of the next generation of therapies that can change the lives of those who struggle each day with mental illness and CNS disorders. And you guys are doing incredible work, so thank you for everything that you're doing. Wonderful. So we want next year that sign up front to show all of our partners to triple, to quadruple, and have new partners every single day that come in and say, we're willing to give our time, our energy, our resources to do what we can to help further research in this area. So thank you guys for what you've done, and I want to thank you next year for what you will do. So we want to say a couple of thank yous. First of all, Chris Southard, is Bill Martin, is he in the room? Kim Vanover, you guys were the inspiration to begin this journey. So thank you so much. It takes visionaries, and the three of you have been incredible. So thank you. It's been a very busy year for us at the STARR Coalition. We've gone to dozens of conferences. We've met with new pharma groups, new sponsors, new CROs, new advocates, and we are beginning to expand our network like never before. Number one, we've got a great project called STARR 911, where we're working with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, because we realize that, sadly, there is it's a difficult place that people can be in when they're struggling with any type of chronic condition, but especially those that may be dealing with mental illness. That suicide and mental illness, unfortunately, sometimes walk hand in hand. So when folks call into your sites and they want to be a part of a clinical trial and they cannot because they do not meet criteria because of suicidal ideation, we're not going to hang the phone up on them. We're going to give them the resources they need to be able to follow up and make sure that they are taken care of so that next time they want to participate, they are there to help change the face of CNS research. So thank you for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We're also working with our great partners from Verified Clinical Trials to work for Project Rockstar, which is giving sponsors the opportunity to be able to set aside a little budget. So every time someone goes to enroll in a clinical research trial, they can take a portion of that money and give it to local advocacy groups in their communities and help strengthen advocacy from the bottom up. And we want this to be standard in every clinical research trial across all indications. We have to support those who are taking a part of clinical research, giving of their minds and bodies to help find new therapies, and we also want them to be able to support local research so they can get the help they need right in the neighborhoods and communities. So we are going to continue to push for Project Rockstar as well. So we want to partner with you. We believe in change. And in speaking of change, we have a very special speaker here tonight that I know that you didn't come to hear me talk. So we are going to bring up our first speaker, or our feature speaker, Patrick J. Kennedy. So listen, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. We all know this man, but in 1994 he was elected the first congressional district of the great state of Rhode Island, which he says is the largest state in the U.S. But he did a lot of great things as he was a representative, but one being the passing of the Mental Health Parity and Addictions Equality Act in 2008, which, you can come on up here, we'll try not to, which finally puts the brain on the same level as every other organ as your body, and we have to treat it the same as we do any other indication. In 2011, he worked with the Staglins to start One Mind, which is an institute that helps study the brain. In 2013, he created the Kennedy Forum, which they're working now with governments, with politicians, with corporate leaders, CEOs, those living with mental illness, that we can begin to ensure that the Parity Act that was passed a decade ago is being implemented from every local community all the way to the federal government. And then, of course, in 2015, he co-authored the book, A Common Struggle, which if you have not read this book, you must read it. It will give you great insight to what it is like to be someone who is living with substance abuse issues and also living with bipolar disorder, but also living the life of being a Kennedy, which has got to be a little surreal, right? I mean, that's got to be surreal. But listen, he is a stalwart advocate for those of us who are living with mental illness and those of us who are working here tonight. He is an incredible husband. He is a father of 5 children who happen to be here tonight, not in the room. They're hopefully asleep at this point, or your wife will be very upset with you. But he is also here to talk to us tonight about the things that we care about, and that's the work that each one of us do. So everybody, please welcome Patrick J. Kennedy.
Thank you, man. Great job. Well, thank you all for that standing ovation. Couldn't wait to use that as an opener. The STARR Coalition, what a great concept that you would be about both expanding basic science research and clinical research as well as building advocacy. What a notion that is, that you can actually think in this space that you can do more than one thing at a time, especially when the people that you're struggling to see get help need help on a variety of levels, not the least of which are the biologics and pharmaceuticals that you're hoping to help create a platform for them to ultimately be able to have their lives transformed by, but also by helping them get connected to the health care that they're often denied because their illness is a mental illness or addiction or some other type of neurological disorder, or that they are being looked down upon by their fellows because these illnesses still have such a persistent stigma and shame associated with them. So on every level, the work you're doing is more than just changing the science in the narrowest of sense. You're changing people's lives, because the science is but one aspect of us trying to build a revolution in the way our society treats those with brain illnesses. And I myself, when asked how did I ever get into this advocacy space, commented that I pretty much didn't have a choice, because when I was born into my family, the first thing that I was taught in my family when I was going to school was that instead of bringing the teacher an apple, that I was to go to school and promise the teacher a living wage. And then I was told that in the 3rd grade that I was to ask when the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primaries were, and so I could know when to put my name onto the ballot for President of the United States. So I grew up very sensitive to what politics was like, but I also grew up very sensitive to what the issues of CNS were like, because it was obviously my uncle, President Kennedy, who signed the Community Mental Health Act of 1963, the last bill that he signed before he was assassinated. But what many people don't know is that it was at the urging of my Aunt Eunice Shriver that my uncle started the National Institute on Children and Human Development. NICHD today bears the name of my Aunt Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who many people may know started the Special Olympics, which is now in 187 countries around the world because of that. And my late uncle, Joseph Kennedy, who died in World War II trying to take out Hitler's buzz bombs over Germany, his legacy, the Lieutenant Joseph B. Kennedy Jr. Foundation, has entirely been dedicated to CNS. For those of you who have seen institutes like the Kennedy Krieger Center down in Baltimore, originally funded through that foundation, or have been out to Vanderbilt and seen the Kennedy Center at Vanderbilt, or gone across the country and seen over a dozen other centers that were started because of the inspiration of my Aunt Rosemary, and of course because of the legacy of my Uncle Joe. So I was steeped in this before I knew what I was part of. And I can honestly tell you the last thing I imagined when I went to Congress myself at the age of 27 was that I was going to somehow be a standard bearer on the issues of mental illness, addiction, and the continued challenge for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It wasn't something that I sought when I went to Congress. I wanted to be a good congressman for my defense industry in Aquidneck Island. I wanted to be a good congressman for the senior citizens who were the largest demographic group in my district. I wanted to be a congressman for working people. I never imagined when I went to Congress that I would be the #1 sponsor of a law that Luke says was as simple as saying that the brain was part of the body. That's all that the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act said. And it said that insurance companies needed to reimburse for the brain the way they would for any other illness of the body, whether that person was inpatient in-network or outpatient in-network, or inpatient out-of-network or outpatient out-of-network, or that they needed pharmacy benefits or emergency room benefits. Those benefits all had to be analogous, as you would find for the cancer patient, the diabetic patient, the cardiovascular disease patient. And they had to be analogous at the primary care level, secondary care level, and the tertiary care level. meaning we don't start treating diabetes when you need to have your leg amputated. We do early screening so that we don't ever have to have that situation or you go blind. But with mental illnesses and addictions, still to this day in this country, we only screen for them when they're stage 4. In the words of my great friend, Paul Gianfrido. And the fact of the matter is that is an indictment on our country that every other part of healthcare, people care about whether you progress into disease. But in mental illness and addiction, we look the other way. I say our modern era can be summed up in one phrase that captured another cause a generation ago when it came to those with HIV/AIDS and those who are being discriminated against because of their sexual orientation. And the phrase is, don't ask, don't tell. That, my friends, is the catch-call for what mental illness and addiction means in the medical system. We have acculturated every single provider group in the medicine world to not look or even think of looking or know what to do when looking when it comes to these issues of mental illness and addiction. And that has to change. And so what we are doing, as Luke said at the Kennedy Forum, is to press the implementation of this parity law. And we've had 10 years since it was signed into law, but it's 10 years too long before we could get it implemented effectively. And what we want to do is get what you're trying to do, and that's get people to sign up. Instead of being signed up to a clinical trial, I want to sign them up to a parity trial. You understand the double entendre on that? Like I want to sue payers who neglect to follow the federal law. In other words, the only way I'm going to do that is if I enroll, you heard that word before, enroll, if I enroll litigants. You hear what I'm saying? I mean people who have been denied through pre-authorization, through concurrent review, through retroactive review. You all know the medical management practices that insurance companies place, but you know what? They place it on everybody. But sometimes they place it on people seeking care for mental health and addiction a little bit more onerously than they would seeking care for someone with medical or surgical care. Thank you, John. And so we created paritytrack.org, and that's your way within the 50 states for you to look up how your state is doing against parity. It's a very rough barometer of how your state's doing based upon case law regulation and statutory authority. But also what we want to do is do parityregistry.org. And parity registry means we want to get people to file a complaint. Now, less than a fraction of 1% even file an appeal. Okay, not surprisingly. Because when they're hit with it the worst possible time in their life, it's when they're least capable of filling out one of those forms like, I want to appeal this denial of care. Okay, their loved one's dying at death's door, or they're at death's door. Last thing they're going to do is file an appeal that you need to be like a Harvard, JD, MBA, CPA, I don't know, give me a couple other initials, because MD, you'll still not be able, CPAs couldn't even file these appeals. They're so complicated. And that's what these insurance companies are doing. They're handing these appeals, you file an appeal. And you know what? Everyone feels alone out there. They have no idea that they're in the same boat as millions of other Americans, by the way, who are insured by the same health plans. And guess what? None of them knows each other. And they don't all know that they all have the same patterns of denials at the same levels of care. and often in the same states. And so the job that we're trying to do at parityregistry.org, which is now part of our don'tdenyme.org, Don't Deny Me campaign, is that we're trying to drive people in each state to file an appeal. Now, what we help on that website, by the way, if anyone knows people who need help, we have the best kind of what we've been told, a guide to how to file an effective appeal. So most people who go to our website just file appeal. Some of them are willing to say, and I will be a public face and voice, which means we can call them and say, like, you know, we can go to Arkansas, Carol and Luke, we can go to Arkansas like you did for bringing that issue up there and say, Mrs. Attorney General, what are you doing to hold your insurance plans accountable in your state? And they'll be like, well, I don't know, because of course no one's ever told them that this is part of their fiduciary and legal obligation as Attorney General and Insurance Commissioner in every one of the 50 states. Most of them don't even know that. But that's what we need to do is educate them. So what we need to do is get our, just take this section of the room. That's all I need. I'm a certified politician. I know no one likes to be called a politician these days. I'm happy to be called a politician. It means I understand how this system works. You take a handful of people who have a story, you add a bunch of additional people who want to support them, and then together you go to the right people and you make your case. That's how democracy works. But for people with mental illness and addiction, this calculus hasn't come to fruition. We just haven't been able to get it together, but I think we're in the midst of a revolution in advocacy. And what we're trying to do is bring this cause to each one of the 50 states, but like the civil rights movement. And it was interesting because President Kennedy was the first president to speak out on civil rights, first American president ever to speak out on civil rights on national television at that time. And he said, who amongst us would trade the color of their skin and be content with those who counsel patience and delay? And of course, people would say, oh, well, President Kennedy, we can wait another decade for the civil rights thing to happen because, it's going to take time. And God bless him, and I'm proud that he's my uncle for no other reason than that. But there are actually many other reasons I'm proud that he's my. The fact that he stood up and gave a speech within hours of seeing African American, his fellow Americans, being fire-hosed by Bull Connors and went on national television to say as an American he couldn't stomach this, and that no American should be able to stomach this, because who but for the grace of I go that same direction. And like his thing is, who would be content? None of us would be content if that were us, if that was my child that was happening to. And so that same moral rule, golden rule, should apply here. And the same challenge of civil rights is really a challenge for mental health and addiction. We are the separate and unequal part of medicine. Am I right? It is the separate and unequal part of medicine. When I used to go for treatment, I would insist, take care of me on campus. And they'd say, no, Congressman, you need to go to, and I know where they meant, the edge of the campus. And by the way, that's in every major medical system in this country. The psychiatric ward, the addiction wards on the furthest part of the, and you know what I want for my kids? I want it to be at the heart of any medical campus, because you know what? You can't do anything else right in medicine if you don't first make sure that someone's mental health and addiction is properly screened and treated. So we need to take a page out of the civil rights book. And that means, like the NAACP did, pick and choose where our battles are. So we might get a good group of enrollees in a particular state that aligns very well with a good attorney general. And that attorney general has said that he or she really supports this. So all we need to do is serve it right up to them. And they'll do what an attorney general in New York did, and that is bring the big payers into contempt for not following the federal and state parity law. And you know what that attorney general got in New York? Not only did he get a big windfall that went to support the very people that you seek to enroll in your trials, but he also made it incumbent on those payers, not only for their right to practice in New York, but that they ended up translating this to their medical management practices nationwide in terms of how they imposed pre-authorization in certain instances. Totally changed the whole paradigm of treatment for millions of Americans, all because of one AG in one state. So what I'm trying to say to all of you who are working in this space around the country is, I don't know where it's going to hit. And it doesn't have to be, it can be in New York, a big state, small state, it could happen anywhere. In my state of Rhode Island, where I represented for 21 years in public office, the Office of Insurance Commissioner cited our biggest payer. And guess what happened? They eliminated all co-pays for mental health and addiction from now on. For mental health and addiction. And it wasn't just because they got stung on the parity law, but they said to themselves, this is politically untenable for us. Because you know what they said to themselves? They said, we cannot compete for the state workers' contract. And we all know the insurance companies, they love that state workers' contract. That's the mother lode. That's where the real coins get dropped in terms of their pockets. And if they have a handful of state reps, Republican and Democrat alike, saying, we're not going to allow this insurance company to sell insurance in our state, nor are they going to be able to compete for our state workers when they have this record, you want to see things change, my friends, in this country with the silence around these issues. You need to hit people where it hurts the most, in the pocketbook. And if it starts becoming shameful, more shameful to deny care than it is to seek care, we are going to have a new day in America where people finally come out of the shadows and not feel so awful on top of their illness, to have the shame on top of their illness, such that they're unwilling to seek care that can actually save their life. That's got to change. I just want to conclude by saying a few things even more specifically to your space. I believe, one, we need a savings bond for the United States and globally, which will speed up the day that we discover all neurological disorder cures by investing in one organ and to do so in a way that makes sense for all the other diagnoses, understanding what you all understand very well, and that is each diagnosis has a whole lot of similarities in terms of the underlying biology, just put it that way, genetics, all right? And I want to have an ability for us to have an expedited, race for the cure type approach, fast tracking. And by the way, we're going to need to have common data elements so that we have replicability in the data, so that we can actually make most sense of all the discoveries that we're making around the world. And we're going to have to harness the supercomputer, which of course now has given us an opportunity to understand and do the kind of data analysis that we never could ever do before, and especially it's so important because the brain is so complex. It's the most important and complex computer ever designed. But let me turn it back to President Kennedy. when he said that we would reach the moon and return a man safely, as he said, before the decade is out. When he said that, no one expected that to happen. But he said it, which meant they had to get about doing it. And of course, it happened just before the decade was out. And the amazing thing about that is that they had to do a crash big science integration, which became NASA. NASA was then integrated all the different data points. And supercomputing really got its start, thanks to that investment, for us to be able to go to outer space. A young undergrad said to me at the time, who later became NASA administrator, said to me, when I heard your uncle, I went right into that world of space exploration. He became the longest serving NASA administrator, Dan Golden, and he said to me, he said, Patrick, right now we have the computing capacity to do research on the brain. In other words, to go to inner space to explore the galaxy of neurons in the brain, because your uncle called us to go to the galaxy and the outer reaches of space 50 years ago. And this, to me, is no coincidence that John F. Kennedy talked about the new frontier, and during his day, it meant outer space. The new frontier for our time is inner space. There can be no doubt about it. Not only so in that respect, I'll say that all of you are amongst our newest generation of astronauts, because you all are part of what that, when they retired the shuttle mission, they asked that the fellow who worked in the back, he had worked there for 30 years during the shuttle mission. They said, how do you feel? And he said, I feel so proud. And they said, well, you're just the guy who works in the back here. Your job is very seemingly insignificant. He said, that's not the way I feel about it. I feel I'm part of a mission. And you ever visit Kennedy Space Center, talk to some of those old folks who worked on those original, they felt part of. It didn't matter where they were in the ranking of who's more important than the other. They were all united by a basic mission. And you all ought to feel that you're part of a mission, because every single new person you're able to enroll is one more data point that may help be that particular piece of data, together with some data over here, together with some data over here, and some data over here, that creates a picture of someone's potential cure to an illness that is right now disabling them, their family member, and will pose that same threat for their next generation, as it does for my 5 Shriver cousins. My Aunt Eunice, as I said at the outset, her name is on the National Institutes for Children and Human Development because she cared about intellectual and developmental disabilities. Her husband, my Uncle Sarge, died of Alzheimer's. Now my 5 Shriver cousins are worried about having Alzheimer's. Where do you think some of the most breaking, cutting-edge research came from? Which of the nearly dozen institutes within NIH? The National Institutes on Children or the National Institutes on Aging? Well, the common answer would be, of course, Congressman Kennedy, it comes from the National Institute on Aging. Isn't that what they study, you nimwit? Well, we've been telling you you're a nimwit for your whole life. Why don't you get it? It came from the National Institutes on Children and Human Development because, you see, 40 years ago, they discovered for people with Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities, dementia was the primary source of side effect, if you were, symptom of Down syndrome. So NICHD was focused on dementia 40 years before anyone even had the word Alzheimer's in their lexicon. So the point is, we don't know where we're going when we go into this race to inner space. It may be that we think we're answering a question on Parkinson's, and suddenly we come up with an answer on mood disorders. Because you see, people with Parkinson's have a big symptom problem with mood disorders. And so that's why we have to be in this together. And that's why it's so exciting. I hope you feel that sense of excitement that you're part of this movement, because we're at a juncture now where we can really change the course of these illnesses, which I think will mean that they're going to be less stigmatized if we, one, feel that they can be treated effectively, and two, know that there is a future whereby, we're making headway to treating the most debilitating aspects of these illnesses going forward. So I thank you all for what you're doing and being at this important CNS event, as you often are. And I want to thank all of those that have successfully invested in some very game-changing medications. We've got a couple of, we're not doing very well these days, as you all know. So I think we ought to have subtyping of populations, and we ought to de-risk the populations for FDA approval, so that we're targeting those molecules, not a one-size-fits-all. They never should have been a one-size-fits-all, but certainly not today, knowing all that we know about them, should we be dealing with this. We ought to be having targeted therapies for targeted populations, genetic profiles, and other biological profiles. We can do that today. We can go back in the medicine cabinet of FDA and repurpose medications that got failed for a one-size-fits-all, but may work for a very good subtype of population for whom it could be a game-changing medication. And these are the kinds of revolutionary things we ought to be insisting, but frankly, we don't have a good lobby effort, just in general. So we've got work to do on that. And I hope that we can make a greater progress in coming up with new biologics and pharmaceuticals, and also new devices. I was great friends with, I am great friends with Nora Volkow, who was part of that study researching depression and addiction. And they said that every time a patient got out of the fMRI, they said, God, I feel better. And the scanner, we noticed enough people getting out of the fMRI saying, I feel better, that he passed it on to the researchers. And the researchers realized that in the course of studying depression, that the scans, the magnetic impulse on the brain of low magnetic frequency impulse, we've all been on those fMRIs. I hope everyone made it out fine, all right. We know that, well, that can make a difference in people's depression. But we haven't been able to really explore that because FDA's device threshold is so onerous for people to invest in that space. So I'm just here to tell you, we got to do all this work not only to get science advanced, FDA to work better, patients to get coverage where they wouldn't otherwise get covered, and in the process of all of that to reduce this shaming that happens to too many people with these illnesses. And I invite all of you to be part of this ongoing effort. The STARR Coalition has been doing great work, and also you can check out the Kennedy Forum or these parity registry, ParityTrack.org as resources for you all as well. Thank you very, very much.
So we had some, I got to tell you a quick story. We were in Little Rock, and where we're from, and don't say anything. We do have our own teeth and shoes on tonight. But we had some issues with Medicaid cuts. We asked Patrick to please come in and talk to us, have a rally at the Capitol. So, of course, we were honored to have his counsel for a while before we went on. We talked about the statistics of cuts and this and that. He said, "You're putting me to sleep." He said, "This is about more than just cuts and statistics." And he went out in front of a large crowd. We had a beautiful crowd in front of the state capitol, gave a rousing speech, and at the last bit, he took a pause for a moment. And then he looked over at the steps of the Capitol and said, and I'm going to try to do it maybe in a Kennedy thing. I want to call out the Attorney General from the state of Arkansas to investigate what's happening at the Capitol, and the governor's complicit in the work that he's doing to cut Medicaid. And I thought, holy hell, he's getting on a plane in an hour, and I'm going to have to pick all the pieces up. But you know what he did? He will roll a grenade in the room, because he knows we have to elevate our thinking beyond just the small points, that it is bigger than a statistic. It's about civil rights. It's about human rights. It's about dignity. It's about parity. And so I appreciate you giving me the ability to think differently about what I need to do in my own life. And I hope that everyone here will think differently about the work that they do, that there is something bigger and greater than ourselves that we're working for. So I appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to take a couple of minutes to actually recognize a couple of grenade rollers that we have in the room here tonight. The last couple of years, we were honored to be able to give some awards out to some of you guys who've been really doing great work, not just within the STARR, but also within your community. So I want to recognize, first of all, Carol. Do you mind coming up with us, Carol? This is Carol with them, everyone. Carol, now get up here. Come up here. Come up here. Carol is the founder of the STARR Coalition and kind of the brain trust behind this. She doesn't always admit it, but she does. But we want to recognize first the sponsor of the year. So this year we want to recognize, the STARR Coalition would like to recognize the sponsor of the year, Intracellular Therapies. So you guys come on up. We've got some folks from ITI. Listen, Yelena, Saylor, Kim Vanover, Susan Kozauer, many of you guys have worked really diligently with us on a lot of our projects. We want to thank you. You guys are innovative, you're dedicated, and you're always looking around the next corner. So please come up and grab your award this year. We need somebody from ITI to come up. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm going to stand over here.
Oh, please. You can stand behind me if you don't want anybody to see that you're here. So we just present the award, and we'll say a big thank you to our folks at ITI. Thank you guys so much.
Come on.
Thank you.
Here, I'll get on this side, and you get.
All right. So we'll have an official picture here, and then okay. Well, we'll just smile. They're taking video. Oh, you're good. All right.
Oh, in the middle.
I know, right? Okay. Sorry. Okay. We learned that you don't want to stand on the end because you look wider than the rest. And since I'm wider than anybody else, I'm the one that needs to be in the damn middle of this picture, but that's fine. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah,
all right.
Good luck, guys. Great job.
Next, we want to recognize Advocacy of the Year. And this year, we want to recognize the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We talked about earlier, please come up, John. We talked about earlier, the statistics are staggering when it comes to those that we love and that we work for in this field with CNS disorders and the number of individuals who were affected by suicide. So AFSP has been dedicated to not only working on helping prevent suicide, but researching ways and best practices that we can make a difference now and into the future. And we work very closely, and I always want to mention her name, Jill Harkavy-Friedman, who's the Director of Research for AFSP. But tonight we're honored to have John Madigan here, who's the Vice President of Public Policy for AFSP and a dear friend of Patrick Kennedy's. And thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we want to recognize AFSP. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Get that.
So you are staying in the middle again.
You're
Okay,
good.
that's fine. So we'll just smile. We got the thing. How are you doing? Good to see you. Thank you.
We're doing great.
Oh, we're doing good. Thank you, John. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next, we want to recognize outstanding achievement. Carol said she may want to say a few words. Do you still?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have a microphone, so I can't say.
Okay, she's making an excuse. Okay, we want to recognize Woodland Research Northwest. Now, Woodland Research Northwest is a part of ERG, Evolution Research Group. And ERG, they call me all the time wanting to do stuff. And it's so exciting to have research sites who are aching to do something new. They are going to be helping us to pilot the program for STARR 911 at all of their 12 locations. But we want to recognize in particular Nicole Gutierrez and Woodland Research Northwest for the great work that they're doing and for her dedication in helping us with a lot of programs that we're working on. So thank you to ERG and thank you to Woodland Northwest. And they're also in Arkansas, so let's give a shout out to our Arkansas folks. How you doing? Oh. And there's a lot of love between these two ladies too. All right. How you doing? Good to see you. Smile. Chin out some again. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. We love you, Nicole.
Sorry, likewise. Thank you.
We also want to recognize, there was a gentleman that was been a great advocate with us. His name was Lou Yagodnik. He passed away about 15 months ago, but if you ever knew Lou, he came to the conferences, he hung out with us. This guy was bigger than life. I remember one time we were trying to get into one of the sponsors' parties, and we had to go through 9 levels of security to get in, and we almost weren't able to get in. I mean, we were just the STARR Coalition, for goodness sakes. But we walk in the door, and here comes Lou Yagodnik walking across the room with a big glass of ice milk, going, "Hey, where have you guys been?" And we're like, "How did you get in here?" He's like, "Oh, I've been talking to everybody." He was bigger than life, but he loved what he did. He did struggle with bipolar disorder, but he was a great advocate. So we named an award after him last year. We do have a couple of guys, Michael Peterson and Barry Spinner, who work for DBSA. Are you guys here with us? Come on, just come on up with us. They work with DBSA South Florida. They knew Lou very well, so I want them to be up here. But the person we're going to award it to, they're actually not here tonight. It is Leslie Franceschi from Cineos. So those that know Leslie know her to be a wonderful guy. Good to see you, Michael. Come on up here. So, yes, and so we've got Jorge Franceschi here, who is fantastic, but the reason why Leslie can't be here tonight.
Appreciate it. Thanks for all you do.
And I'm telling you, you're just as good looking as your wife.
Love what you
is
do.
the fact that she is in a speed skating competition. So if you think that you're intense, you got nothing against Leslie Franceschi. But I will tell you, Leslie has been a great consultant with us at the STARR. She is always motivated to look for the next great thing that they can do to help patients and to help individuals living with CNS disorders and mental illness. And I know that she wanted to be here tonight, but obviously she thought skating was more important. And that's okay, but I know that she had a couple prepared remarks. Is that correct? Oh, yes. Okay, so you want to go to the mic over there? Why don't you go to the mic? She wanted to say something. So everybody just imagine this is Leslie Franceschi.
Hi, everybody. I told her I was going to wing it, but then she said, no, I got a written statement here. So she says, confidence is a choice, kindness is free, courage a gift. Empower yourself and others to be the change needed in advocacy to help those who can't speak for themselves. For tireless caregivers busy with service to their loved one, thank you, Carol and Luke and the STARR Coalition for being the platform for change agents, for using each of our unique talents in combination to rewrite policy, transform the narrative, and pay it forward. I am humbled to receive this honor and be part of this human rights revolution. Frammy.
Fantastic. All right, so we'll get a picture with you, and we'll tell everybody, text Leslie in a little bit and tell her how much that she missed here tonight. Okay. All right. They're everywhere. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for being a part of Lou's memory. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This goes to Jorge.
Yeah, it goes to Jorge. Yeah, this is your, take this home. What are you doing? All right, very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. And then the last one we have actually is CRO of the Year. And CRO of the Year this year, we'd like to recognize Syneos Health. Now, Syneos, they've got a great group of folks. Leslie Franceschi with Mission, Chris Southard, Lindsay Morales, Alexandria Wise Rankovic. I hope we got your name right. But you guys are phenomenal. Again, they work with us on a lot of different projects. As a matter of fact, they do a lot of stuff that not only focuses on solid research, but also focuses on patient care. So we would like to recognize you guys and thank you so much for all your work. All right. Here's yeah.
Okay, you need to get in.
Do I scoot in? Okay, here I'm in. Hey, how you doing?
Oh, I keep looking at that.
It doesn't matter. We can't see anything up here anyway. All right, good. So thank you guys. Also, they sponsor the pins tonight that say I support CNS research. And if you don't use it for that, you can go into any small town and become a sheriff. So it's really, and it was my fault. I think the pins were a little too large. But you guys, thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much. All right. And you know, we had a call the other day working with their team, and they wanted to inform us on some really interesting and creative work they're doing with patient care. And so I said, would you guys mind spending just a couple of minutes speaking to us a little bit about this great project they're doing? Because we know that caregivers are an important part in the puzzle of taking care of those and supporting individuals that we know that are living with mental illness and other CNS disorders. And I wanted to share, if they would, for a few minutes about their project. So Carrie McDonough, if you don't mind standing up and maybe telling us a little bit about it. All right, good. Well, then we'll move out of your way during this. All right, so go ahead.
The mic is on. Yes. Yeah. Can you all hear me? Awesome. Well, I was just telling Patrick, I can't believe I have to follow him in saying anything at all, but I will do my very best. I work at Syneos Health, and just by way of context, I sit in our by way of context, I sit in our commercial team, the folks that just received this award, and I just sort of hung up and jumped on the stage with them. They are in our clinical team, and together we all sort of put our minds and hearts into our mission every day at Syneos, which is about closing the gap and getting from lab to life faster so that more patients can reap the benefits of scientific discovery. That's kind of the heart of it. And when we were thinking about thematics and areas we wanted to dig into, one of those areas was caregiving, because we realized that caregivers are kind of with us every step of the way when it comes to scientific discovery, whether we're talking about at the point of the clinical trial, and caregivers are often key in helping patients make that decision whether or not they're going to take the leap of faith that is required when you're entering a clinical trial. They're also really critical when it comes to retention in trials. And then on the flip side, when you get to the commercial end, caregivers are key when it comes to adherence and a gazillion other functional areas. One thing that we wanted to do at Syneos was dig a little bit deeper beyond those functional areas, because sometimes we're only thinking, at the industry level, we're only thinking about caregivers in terms of the function they're serving for patients. And the reality is there's so much more going on there with any caregiver at any time. You know, we're often using shorthand, right? We're talking about caregivers, they're heroes. They're doing God's work. And yes, that's true, and it's amazing, and there's definite truth in all of those tropes, but the reality is that those are unidimensional concepts, and they're kind of a little bit reductionist because they're not recognizing that whole person that is putting so much of their, effort into taking care of someone. So to better understand caregivers was a goal of ours, and we really believed that that would help us better understand the needs of patients, the needs of communities, and ultimately help us do our jobs better. And so we embarked on a survey of 1,000 caregivers from across the healthcare spectrum. So this was mental health, oncology, respiratory, the whole kit and caboodle in terms of serious medical conditions. And note, I included mental health as a serious medical condition, not just a behavioral health condition to kind of put over to another side. And so like I promised, I was going to be short, so I'm only going to point out a couple of things that I thought would be most interesting to y'all, and those are a couple of points that we identified that separated what caregivers in the mental health space were saying compared to the general sort of population of caregivers. So the larger sample was about 1,000, the caregivers in the mental health space, and we were looking at mental illness plus substance use, that was about 140. And what we saw when we looked at those guys versus the larger population was really upsetting and compelling. And it was especially interesting to me because I am also a caregiver. My partner has bipolar disorder, traumatic brain injury, and PTSD. And so it definitely hits home for me. And I've also worked in the CNS space for almost 2 decades. So there's a lot there, and it's very important. And so what did we see? We saw that mental health caregivers reported feeling less likely to bounce back after hard times. They also reported that they have less control over their lives than other caregivers. So these are feelings that they had about sort of their own internal locus of control. They were also significantly more likely to say they wanted better sleep and to break bad habits, and more likely to want information related to their own health and their own emotional well-being. They were asking for information for themselves when it came to things like anxiety and depression and loneliness. And I mean, we all know that loneliness is a huge factor when it comes to mental illness, but we usually think about it from the point of view of the patient. But it's also very important, and I think the advocates in the room will get this already, but I think there's a lot of education to do beyond that, that it's not just the isolation that happens to the individual, but it's the isolation that happens across the entire network of an individual's community. And then finally, the data showed that there are mental health caregivers are potentially bearing the brunt when it comes to the financial consequences of caregiving. We saw that mental health caregivers were more than 2 times as likely to want more information on debt management, how to make more money, and how to budget. And I think a lot of what Patrick was just saying really kind of gets to the heart of that. Mental health caregivers are on the front lines of complex, often erratic illnesses, but they're also on the front lines of a mental health system that's in crisis. We've got skyrocketing suicide rates. We've got a dearth of specialists in mental health that is problematic. And we have mental health insurance, or the lack thereof, that is very, very, very challenging. And I wouldn't even pretend to be able to say it better than Patrick already has. But these are things that these folks are facing day in and day out without breaks. And it's just important for us all to kind of recognize that and figure out ways to help them. And by doing that, we'll be able to help patients. And hopefully we also will be able to, ultimately become the astronauts that Patrick has all asked us to become, so that we can really move, finally, the needle in mental health in a way that families, people living with mental health conditions deserve to see that needle moved. So thank you for your time. Thank you to Luke and the entire coalition for fantastic work. And that would be it.
Thank you, Senios. Thank you, Carrie. We talked about the caregiver a little earlier, and coming in, Carrie was talking about what I think is important, that the entire focus is not on a process, it's about the people that will be affected. And I think that if we start from that point, then everything else outside will work. So thank you guys for what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for what you're doing.
I need a coat like that too. That's a really nice jacket. And quickly, I want to bring Patrick up for one more thing. We've got one quick something for him. Hand that to me. No, it's this right here. Yeah. So we forgot to do this earlier. Patrick, we want to present you, this is a beautiful fountain pen along with some lime green ink that you can have, because lime green is a color for mental health. Yes, and you wore your green tie tonight. It looks beautiful. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for being a voice. We really appreciate everything you do. So thank you, Patrick. Thank you to all of our award winners, ITI, Cineos, AFSP, Woodland, Research Northwest, and of course Leslie Franceschi. And also we have a lot of wonderful advocates here tonight from all over the U.S. we brought in. So please wave your hand if you're here from NAMI, Mental Health America, Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, SARDA. We've got Linda from SARDA. So thank you all for coming in tonight and being a part of this. Just to let you know, we are a nonprofit organization. Carol has privately funded this for the first 3 years. We are now starting to look for outside funding, and we want to thank Otsuka for the very first donation we've ever had came from Otsuka. So we appreciate that so that we can continue the mission of what we're doing. And thank you for Fog Dog. They're going to come back up and play for us for a few minutes. Guys, get involved. There's no excuses. We want to be there to help you in any way, and we want you to be there to help us in any way. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Carol. And please drink up, eat up, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you all very much.